Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I call the meeting to order. Good evening to anybody who may be following us online. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards, Leader of the Council, and I am Chairman of Cabinet. There being no members of the public present this evening, we'll dispense with the normal health and safety announcements, but I would ask everybody to please make sure your mobile phones are turned off and your devices on silent. With that, we will move straight into the agenda. Item 1, Mark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. All Cabinet members are present, but we have apologies from the Chief Executive, Mr Tony Zayman, with family commitments, and subsequently he's been unable to attend due to the rail strike.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Are there any additional declarations, colleagues? None noted. To approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting, pages 1 to 10, are they agreed? Agreed. Item 4. This is to confirm that there are items of business in both Parts 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is the public meeting, which is followed online presently. Part 2 are matters considered in private. These tend to be commercial in confidence in nature. There is a report at item 12 that sets out, previews those matters, and the decisions are published. There will be a break in the meeting as we move from Part 1 to Part 2, when the YouTube channel will be cut. Okay, so we're now turning to the substantive agenda items. The first of those is agenda item 5, report from the Resident Services Select Committee. Councillor Bridges, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you very much. Let me invite you to present your report to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening to yourself and the Cabinet. I am pleased to present the Resident Services Select Committee review into empty homes council tax premium. Our review looked at whether the council was applying the premium to maximum effect as an incentive to help bring empty homes back into use. This premium is a percentage charge applied in addition to the existing council tax charge on those non-exempt properties that are left empty and substantially unfurnished for a number of years. These are properties that do not have a valid reason to make them exempt from paying council tax. As of October 2022, there were 144 such properties in the borough. In Hillingdon, for a number of years, we have applied a 50% premium to all such properties, irrespective of how many years they have been empty. However, our analysis showed that a large number of local authorities were applying the maximum premiums permitted, ranging from 100% up to 300%, depending on the number of years the property was empty. The committee received professional advice from finance and revenue officers, and I would also like to thank Tina, a local resident, for her insightful testimony as someone affected by the blight caused by such a long-term empty property. After considering all relevant factors, the committee agreed that maximising the use of the empty homes council tax premium afforded to us in law would be a strong financial incentive to encourage owners to sell or refurbish their long-term empty properties. The committee also believed this could potentially reduce the council's expenditure on temporary accommodation, and for residents like Tina who testified before our committee, it could also lead to an improvement in the condition of such properties currently impacting upon their neighbours. Furthermore, the committee's recommendations to increase and phase in the maximum premiums from the next financial year 22 to 23 onwards will raise welcome significant additional council tax revenue over the medium term, which we advise would more than outweigh any additional costs, if required, for debt recovery. Therefore, I commend the committee's report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bridges. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Councillor Bridges, and thank you to your committee for their report. And if you would take my thanks back to them for this comprehensive piece of work which has addressed this important issue. The recommendations from the committee were to take forward to council, because obviously these are, in the end, council finance decisions, that the empty homes council tax premium is increased. And I'm happy to support those recommendations tonight. There are 3 recommendations in respect of this report. They're listed on page 12 of the Cabinet papers, being to increase the empty homes council tax premium applicable to non-exempt properties empty for more than 2 years from the current 50% to 100% in the 23-24 financial year, and to phase in increases up to 300% over subsequent years. And there are specific circumstances where the premium cannot be applied, and these are set out in the report. I commend the recommendations to Council.
Thank you. Councillor Bridges, I also wish to thank yourself and your committee for doing this work. It is good. There is so much that the Council does that sometimes we lose sight of some of the detail, and this is where select committees are helpful. And it's really good that you have picked this up and your colleagues, and particularly that we're lending support to a resident who's obviously blighted by having such a property nearby. And it shows that we are a responsive council. We do listen to our residents, and we do take note of what they're saying. In this case, it has the additional bonus of bringing in much wanted housing and additional revenue for the council. So you've sort of struck on just about every front there. So congratulations, and thank you very much for the report and the work well done. Colleagues, the recommendations agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Turn now to agenda item 6, the monthly council budget monitoring report. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Leader. This is the report of the results to the 31st of October 2022 within the financial year 22-23, which is referred to as month 7. It continues to be the case that the overall financial position of the council is one of stability, dependability and strength, and indeed we're now seeing the benefits of our extensive transformation programme emerging. If we look at the general fund revenue account, there was an underspend of £61,000 against budget, which is a small positive variance of £11,000 from the result previously reported at month 6. General balances continue to be projected at £26.8 million, which again is consistent. We have exceptional pressures arising during the financial year derived from COVID-19, where of course we ceased to receive central government support at the beginning of the financial year. These pressures are projected at £14.7 million, which is lower than last year, but still £3.4 million greater than budget, and this excess over budget is being absorbed within earmarked reserves. If we look at our programme of savings for the 22-23 financial year, that is progressing well. Of £13.3 million of savings budgeted for the year, £12.4 million are banked or are progressing for delivery by the year end. A further £1 million relates to our leisure centres, and this, which has been a problematical saving, is nearing resolution with an agreement under negotiation, which will deliver this saving in subsequent years. Looking at our general fund capital expenditure, the expenditure for the year is expected to be £59 million below budget, largely due to delays in the commencement of agreed projects. Very substantial elements of this expenditure will be proposed to be rephased into later financial years, as you will hear later. Turning to the dedicated schools grant, the position has also suffered from cost inflation, particularly in respect of high needs placements, to the extent of £543,000, and that is identical to the month 6 position. However, the projected year-end deficit will be showing a further reduction to £21.8 million, which is still £1.7 million lower than last year's closing position. Turning to the housing revenue account, this continues to report close adherence to budget, with a forecast surplus against budget of £51,000, being an £8,000 improvement on the position reported at month 6. Similarly, within the housing revenue account, there is an underspend of capital budgets of £49 million. Unlike the general fund, this is largely due to project delays, and this will be proposed to be rephased into later years. Colleagues, I therefore move recommendation 1 within Part A of the report, set out on page 2 of Pack B. Furthermore, within Part B of the report, set out on page 28 of the pack, there are a number of recommendations itemised A to E, together with an additional set of recommendations F to I, which are set out in the addendum. The vast majority of these are self-explanatory. However, I would like to draw colleagues' attention to recommendation B, which proposes the rephasing into later years of capital budgets for the general fund and the housing revenue account in the sums of £49.8 million and £31 million respectively. I therefore move recommendations A to I. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard, and thank you for your continued stewardship of our money. Are these recommendations, including those on the addendum, agreed, my colleagues?
Agreed.
Thank you. We move, please, to agenda item 7, the Council's budget, the medium-term financial forecast for 2023-24 through to 2027-28. Councillor Goddard again.
Thank you, Leader. This report deals with the financial budget for the year ending the 31st of March 2024. It also covers the medium-term financial forecast for the years 23-24 through to 27-28. And the iteration of the budget which is being put forward is being submitted for consultation, subject to your approval, from today until the end of January 2023. If we look at the major background and features around this budget, we are, of course, in a very tough economic environment at the present time, and there are strong indications that we will see more of this to come for some time. If we look at our general fund expenditure, this has suffered from heavy upwards pressure in a number of different ways. Firstly, we have had very heavy inflation, the most heavy for 40 years. Secondly, we have the legacy of COVID-19 and the costs which now fall upon the Council exclusively. And of course, in addition to that, we have the ever-increasing demand for social care. Quite simply, central government support in the form of grants and our retained share of business rates does not match and keep pace with the level of increases in those cost pressures. As things stand at the present time, we await the settlement from central government, which will codify exactly what we're entitled to in this respect. But it is clear that these sources of financing to us will not keep pace with the growth in our costs. If we look at our total service expenditure in the General Fund, this will increase from 251 million in the current financial year to 263 million in 23-24. But it must be emphasised that this is after the realisation of savings amounting to £21 million. These savings are part of a larger programme generating £45 million over the next 5 years and are focused on back-office routines and modernising and streamlining the manner in which frontline services are delivered. And I must emphasise that there have been no cuts to key frontline services in arriving at this programme. To address the increase in costs, we're proposing an increase in council tax of 4.99%, which comprises an increase in core council tax of 2.99% and an increase in the social care precept of 2%. It is also necessary to look at a reset in our fees and charges, which is aimed at covering the direct costs of delivering discretionary services which are not used by all of our residents. The increase in council tax is well below the current prevailing rate of inflation and will see the cost of council tax on a Band D property rise by £1.21 per week. It should also be noted that Hillingdon has one of the very lowest levels of council tax in Outer London as a consequence of the past 10-year freeze on council tax levels. Even with the reset of fees and charges levels, Hillingdon will still have the lowest level of fees and charges in London. The General Fund capital budget will see us invest a substantial £340 million in our infrastructure and our facilities between 22-23 and 27-28. In the housing revenue account, rents will increase by 7%, and we will continue with our capital programme, which amounts to £621 million between 22-23 and 27-28. This being deployed on improving the quality of our housing, increasing the size of our stock, and continuing with major innovative schemes such as the Hayes Regeneration Project. We've put forward proposals which are a realistic reflection of the current challenging economic environment, enshrined within a balanced budget, and they therefore move the 5 recommendations set out on page 33 of Pack B. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. And whilst I can anticipate quite a healthy debate and discussion in Council in February when the budget is finalised, what I don't think there will be much debate about is the challenge of the economic circumstance and the backdrop that we face collectively. I believe that you have developed here a very prudent budget, a cautious budget, rightly so in that the details of the settlement are not yet fully known, and there is scope for minor refinements subject to the outcome of that settlement. But it draws a very healthy balance between securing our financial future, ensuring our continued financial stability, whilst maintaining the support for our vulnerable residents, the universal services that our residents have come to expect, and our continued investment in our borough across it all. I congratulate you and your team, the finance team, in pulling this together, and I have no hesitation in recommending to colleagues that we accept this as a basis for consultation. Colleagues, are the 5 recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Very pleased to agenda item 8, the grants to Hillingdon's local voluntary organisations 2023-24. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. I will formally move the recommendations which are on page 22 of the report. And once again, Hillingdon is proudly supporting our voluntary sector in the forthcoming year to the tune of over £1.6 million to a vast number of organisations doing all kinds of good deeds and support work across our borough, all the way from the top to the bottom. And we have decided, however, and communication had begun with our voluntary sector many months ago, that this traditional way of just giving support grants probably needed to be reviewed in view of the circumstances that we all find ourselves in, and in particular from the after effects and the lessons learnt during the pandemic and the impacts that it has had on the voluntary sector and how it could support and how it interplays with our own statutory services. Therefore, the recommendations include a discussion about this year, April 23, financial year beginning April 23, being the last where traditional straight grants are granted, and that we move to a commissioning service basis where we can ensure more accurately that the voluntary sector and ourselves are getting the better outcomes for residents that we require, achieving the best value for money that we wish to achieve, and organisations becoming less dependent on grants themselves and becoming more self-sufficient as a voluntary sector. So the recommendation includes a report back to this Cabinet in September 23 with more detailed proposals as to how those commissioning arrangements can come into force from April 24. And in the meantime, we will continue to support our voluntary sector in the way in which we have done as indicated. And there's a recommendation in there also, you will note, that we continue to contribute towards the London Council's grant scheme, which is a statutory requirement and not necessarily one of our choice, but our 228,000 goes towards support that. The Appendix C, which sets out the individual contributions for each of the voluntary sector that we are supporting, is set out having undertaken discussions and equality impact assessments, and therefore we are strongly minded that by the time we get to the 1st of April next year, those are the amounts that we will be distributing in the form of grants. I move.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mills. It is no surprise that when we bring around change of our grants that there is likely to be some anxiety, concern and challenge. But it's also right when we are talking about such large sums of money, £1.6 million of public funds, that it isn't just merely gifted, that we are clear about the benefits that's coming back and we can show our residents the value for money for their £1.6 million that's delivered. And therefore the move to commissioning, I think, is absolutely the right way of doing it. I'm pleased that you have found this interim period to enable our charities to adjust. And this isn't the totality of it all. The Council continues to support our charities in other ways, in addition to the straightforward grant gifting. Colleagues, are the 7 recommendations in the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We turn to agenda item 9, the Transport for London Local Implementation Plan, the Annual Spending Submission. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, it is, as you say, known as LIP to many, and this, I would just make clear, is the submission. So it isn't necessarily what we end up with, but it is the application for funds. And the details of that application is set out on the following pages, and in particular there's a table at the bottom of page 179. But before going any further, I'd just like to move one minor amendment, which is in respect to the cycle training and additional funding at the top of page 181, and I'll point to the addendum sheet where the figures are slightly wrong. It's 82,000 and not 77, and then the figures add up. What we have, the mayor doesn't necessarily agree with the approach we have in Hillingdon, or perhaps I should say that we don't agree with his approach, and he would have us all walking or cycling or taking buses, and the reality, of course, is that in this borough that's not a practical option for most of us, and his plans are therefore to point us in that direction rather than perhaps the direction we would like to go. However, what you will see reading through this is that our application covers a number of activities, improvements to zebra crossings and the installation of zebra crossings at schools, and a new bridge, upgrade to the canal towpath, some cycle improvements, and the like. And in time we will find out whether we get this money, some of it, all of it, and whatever. It does also provide us funds, which is an important thing which we are involved with and keen to support, for ongoing parking management schemes and that sort of thing for local residents. The 3 recommendations at the top of page 178, and I so move.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bianco, and I long for the day that we are considered trustworthy enough to just be given this grant without the bureaucracy that goes on here of bidding and counter-bidding and holding people to account. We can spend considerably more than this very sensibly, but for some unknown reason we have to enter into this bureaucracy to satisfy the Mayor of London. That being the case, colleagues, do the 3 recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Turn please to agenda item 10, the Statement of Gambling Policy. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Leader. The gambling policy came to Cabinet in September 2022 for us to consult on an updated version. There were no significant changes to national policy in the time that this has been in operation, and therefore the update was very much a tidying up around the edges rather than anything else. The formal consultation period commenced 12th of September and ended 24th of October, including responsible authorities, other stakeholders, the Licensing Committee and Select Committee. There have been no significant responses from those consultations. This is a formal council policy requiring to be adopted by council. The recommendation tonight is that Cabinet recommends to council that we adopt the updated Statement of Gambling Policy. I move.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, is that so agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 11, the 2022-23 Better Care Fund, Section 75 agreement. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening. I'm asking Cabinet to agree the recommendations as per page 250, but could I just point out a slight amendment that the figure on page 250 should read 21645. The 20485 is the figure for 2122, so apologies for having that on paper. The report before the Cabinet concerns the agreement that will give legal effect to the financial and partnership arrangements in the 2022 Better Care Fund plan agreed by the Health and Wellbeing Board, of which I chair. It's coming to Cabinet so late in the year because of nationally set timescales that we have no control over locally. National Better Care Fund conditions mean that it's not possible for the Council and the Integrated Care Board to sign the agreement until confirmation that the plan has been assured is received, and unfortunately this is still awaited. So to address the ongoing issue of the late publication of the BCF planning requirements, Cabinet is being asked to agree the arrangements for the 2022-23 agreement to roll forward. This will ensure clarity about responsibilities for the Council and the Integrated Care Board until there is a new agreement to reflect the contents of a new Better Care Fund plan. The proposed delegation arrangements for amending the agreement provide some agility to respond to evolving events. An immediate example of this is the Hospital Discharge Fund, the requirements of which were announced on the 18th of November. This makes 1.9 million to Hillingdon to support the hospital discharge, subject to a spend plan being agreed by the Health and Wellbeing Board and the funding in the Better Care Fund, which has to be spent by the 31st of March. For going forward, it's understood that there'll be a 2-year plan from April 2023, and publication of planning requirements is once again awaited. So in the meantime, discussions will take place between officers and partners, and in due course Cabinet. It is hoped that officers will be able to bring the Better Care Fund Section 75 agreement to Cabinet at an earlier point in 2023, but this is out of our control. And I would just like to say that the document that before Cabinet is yet another good example of Hillingdon's great partnership working with our health colleagues. I so move, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palmer, and that point you make at the end is absolutely right. It is a great statement of our ambition and close working with our health colleagues and the value that we put in achieving greater health equality outcomes for our residents. It is just frustrating and probably will be mystifying to our residents of why the bureaucracy required delays it such. But that is yet again life in local government at times. Are these 3 recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 12 is the public preview of matters to be considered in private. This is a paper that is not required but is provided to give greater transparency of the matters that are going to be discussed in part 2. They set out greater detail and greater explanation than would otherwise or previously have been available, and I very much hope that residents find that of use, as we must now move into part 2 to consider those items in private. I'm going to ask the link to be broken. Thank you.